So section 1.2, we're going to deal with the different equations of lines. Let's start with the slope-intercept form, which is probably the form you're most familiar with, and that is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So when I say y-intercept, that's where it crosses the y-axis, or that's your starting point. So from there, let's talk about slope for a minute. Our slope is usually we use an M to stand for slope. Slope is your rise over run. It's also your rate of change, or you've probably seen it written change in Y over change in X, where the little delta means change in. And what that means mathematically is you have 2 points and you subtract the 2 points to get your change in Y. You would subtract your Y coordinates. And to get your change in X, you would subtract your X coordinates. And here, just know order doesn't matter. If you started with point 1, you could do Y1 minus Y2 as long as you started with X1 on the bottom and then did X2. Those are just labels of points, the subscripts, so it doesn't matter which one you name, point 1 and point 2. What you don't want to do is mix them up from top to bottom. So if I did Y2 minus Y1 and then did X1 minus X2, then you're not going to get the correct slope. So make sure you keep them in order. Let's talk about the different types of slope. If you have a slope that rises from left to right, that's going to be a positive slope. If it falls from left to right, that's going to be a negative slope. If you have a horizontal line that has a slope of 0, and the reason why it has a slope of 0 is if you choose any 2 points on that line, when you go to rise, you don't rise any, you just run. So it's going to be, your slope would be 0 over, say you ran 2. 0 divided by 2 is just 0. So it doesn't matter what any 2 points you pick is going to be 0 divided by some number. And then the other type of slope is undefined, and that is a vertical line. So again here, if I pick 2 points, when I say I could rise 2, but when I run, I don't run any. And 2 divided by 0, you can't divide by 0. So that's what makes it undefined or does not exist. So those are your 4 different types of slope. Let's do an example of finding slope. It says find the slope of the line that passes through the points -2, 6 and 1, 4. I want you to label these points x1, y1, and x2, y2. If you do this every time, you tend to not make simple mistakes where you mess up your point. So remember, the change in the y goes on top, so y2 minus y1, or you could do y1 minus y2, it doesn't matter. And then x2 minus x1. So here I'm going to have 4 minus 6 over 1 minus a -2. So 4 minus 6 is going to give me a -2. And then when I do 1 minus a -2, that'll give me a +3. So I have a slope of -2/3. So just make sure you keep that in order. Whatever y you start with the corresponding x on the bottom. Okay, look at this example. It says graph the line, and it gives you the line in slope-intercept form. So here our slope is -3/4, and our intercept is -4. make sure you pull that sign along with it. Don't leave out any of your signs because that tells you where it's going to be on the graph. So you're going to start with the y-intercept, which is your starting point. So I'm going to start at -4 on the y-axis. That's my starting point. And from there, I'm going to count my slope. I'm going to rise, or in this case, I'm going to fall because it's a -3 and run 4. So I'm going to fall 3 and run in the positive direction 4. That gives me my -3/4. Now, if you were going to go up 3, you would have to go in the negative direction 4 to get the -3/4. So this would be +3, -4. Either way, it puts you on the line. So that gives you the line that passes through -4 and has a slope of -3/4. Now let's look at a different form, and this is point slope form. You will use this to find slope intercept form, which is what we were just looking at. So point slope form, it's called point slope form for a reason, and that is because the formula has a point and the slope in it. So you've got y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So notice you've got a point and the slope. That's why it's called the point slope form. So we use that if we're given the slope in one point. It says write the equation of the line with a slope of -3 and passing through 4, 8. We're going to use that point slope form to put it into y equals or slope intercept form. So until you have this formula memorized, go ahead and write it down. And then label everything it gives you. Our slope is your m, -3, and your point is x1, y1. With that labeled, you're just going to straight substitute into your equation. So I've got y minus 8 equals -3 times x minus 4. So now I'm going to put it in y equals form. I'm going to distribute first with my order of operations. So I've got y minus 8 equals -3x. And then make sure you multiply through the parentheses and multiply your signs together. So I have a -3 times a -4 will give me a +12. And then to get y by itself, you're going to add 8 to both sides, giving you y equals -3x plus 20. So that's the equation of the line. Unless they state otherwise, when they ask for the equation of the line, they want it in y equals. Now the other situation, instead of giving you the slope in one point, sometimes they'll just give you 2 points. But we're going to do the same thing. We just, before we can plug into the slope in or the point slope form, we've got to find the slope. So here I'm going to label my points again. So my slope is going to be -3 minus 4 over 1 minus 3. So I've got -7 over 1 minus 3 will be -2. And then a negative divided by a negative gives you a positive. So my slope is 7 over 2. Now that I have the slope, I can plug the slope and 1 point into my point slope form. Now don't get too confused. I know we have 2 points here, but I only need to choose one. So it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to choose the 0.34 just because it doesn't have a negative. and I'm going to plug that in. Y minus 4 equals, my slope was 7 over 2 that I just found, and then x minus 3. So that's using x1 and y1. So again, I need to distribute. I know that's a scary fraction, but don't be too scared of it. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to distribute 7/2 times x is just 7/2 x. And then over here on the side, if I do 7 over 2 times -3, I'm going to put that over 1. And when you multiply by fractions, you just do top times top, bottom times bottom. So I got 7 times -3 is -21, and 2 times 1 is 2. Now that won't reduce. I'm just going to leave it as an improper fraction. I'm pretty sure your homework will take it if you change it to a decimal, but sometimes they don't come out to nice even decimals. They'll carry on forever. A fraction is always exact. You don't have to round with it. So I'm almost done, except I need to get y by itself. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Here again, I've got a fraction plus a whole number. So I've got -21 over 2 plus 4, and I'm going to put that over 1. Now, to add or subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So my common denominator here is 2. Oops. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2. Because really, if I'm changing that to a 2 in the denominator, but I'm really not changing the value of the number because I'm just multiplying it by 1. 2 over 2 equals 1. So that's going to give me 21 over 2 plus 8 over 2, which 8 over 2 is just equal to 4. I've just written it so that I have a common denominator of 2. So once you have a common denominator, you can just add or subtract the top. So -21 plus 8 is going to give me a -13. So I've got -13 over 2 is my B. And you can leave it like that, or you can change it to 6.5 or 6.5. They're all equivalent. Okay, so that's point slope form. The third form is standard form, and this one is usually you might see an equation given to you in standard form and you have to put it in y equals. We're going to work backwards from that. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now there's a couple things that have to be true. Your a needs to be positive, and none of your coefficients, your a, b, or your c, can't be fractions. So if you look at our example, it says write the equation y equals 5/2 x minus 4 in standard form. The first thing I see as a problem is that we have a fraction. So to get rid of that fraction, I'm going to multiply, let me show you over here, 5 over 2. If I multiply that by 2, I get 10 over 2, which is just 5. So if you multiply through by the denominator, it'll get rid of the fraction. The problem is you can't just multiply the 5 over 2. If I multiply one thing, I have to multiply everything. So I'm going to multiply the whole equation by 2. So that'll give me 2y equals 5x minus 8. Now I've gotten rid of the fraction. Now I need to get it in ax plus by equals c form. Notice my 5x is positive already on that side. So I'm just going to do a little rearranging. I'm going to subtract 2y from both sides and add 8 to both sides. So it'll basically move this over here and move this over here. Just a little switcheroo. So that will give me 8 equals 5x minus 2y. And then I'm just going to flip the whole equation. So my a minus my 5x minus 2y is on the left equals c, which is 8. So that's your equation in standard form. So the key there is get rid of any fractions and then rearrange it so that you have ax plus by equals c. So let's take a look at vertical and horizontal lines. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about slope. If you have a vertical line, let's say it's right here, going up or down, that slope is undefined. So when that happens, there's no equation where you have y equals. It's just going to be x equals whatever point it's going through or whatever x coordinate it's going through. And we're just calling it c. So if that went through 4, that equation would be x equals 4. That's the whole equation, because anywhere on that line, x equals 4. Now for a horizontal line, that's going to have a slope of 0. And you can work this one out mathematically. If it's got a slope of 0 and you have y equals mx plus b, if your slope is 0, your x term is going to disappear or go to 0, and it leaves you with y equals b. So you can work the horizontal line out mathematically. The vertical line, you just need to know that that's going to be the equation x equals, not y equals. So vertical, it's x equals whatever number it passes through, and horizontal is going to be y equals whatever number it passes through. So look at these two examples. Before we do anything, I just want you to look at the points. If you notice these 2 points, your y values are the same. So just like before, if I had 2 points, I've got to find the slope first. Well, when you do your y2 minus y1, you're going to get 1 minus 1 over 4 minus a negative 3, which is going to give you 0 over 7, which is just equal to 0. So if you have a slope of 0, you should automatically know that that's a horizontal line. But if you don't know that, you can always go back and plug it into your slope-intercept form, and it'll work out to the same answer. But here, if you notice that your slope is 0 and it's going through the same y values, your answer is going to be y equals whatever those y values are. So y equals 1. On the next one, if you notice, it's switched around so that your x values are the same. So when you go to find slope here, you're going to have 4 minus a negative 3 on top and a 1 minus 1 on the bottom. So we've got 7 over 0. Well, that's not possible, so our slope is undefined. So here you're going to have x equals whatever your x values are, because you've got a vertical line. Okay, we're going to cover perpendicular and parallel lines in the next video. So those are your 3 forms of an equation, slope, and how to deal with using the different formulas and vertical and horizontal lines.